What happens when one of country music's biggest stars sits down for what should be a routine morning show interview, only to have it turn into one of the most uncomfortable moments in live television history? This is a story of how a simple question spiraled into a full-blown confrontation that ended with Carrie Underwood walking off the set of Good Morning America, leaving millions of viewers stunned and the host sitting in shocked silence. Before we get into what went down, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling us what you think about celebrity interviews gone wrong. Now let's dive into what really happened that morning. The interview started off innocently enough. Carrie walked onto the set with her usual poise, greeting the host with a warm smile and settling into the chair across from her. The host, known for her direct interviewing style, opened with some light conversation about Carrie's latest album, her upcoming tour dates, and her family life. Everything seemed perfectly normal, exactly what you would expect from a promotional interview on a major morning show. The first few minutes were textbook morning television. Carrie talked about the inspiration behind her new music, sharing anecdotes about writing sessions and the creative process. She laughed at the appropriate moments, gave thoughtful answers, and seemed genuinely engaged in the conversation. The host complimented her on the album's success, and Carrie graciously thanked her fans for their continued support. Then came the shift. The host leaned forward slightly, her tone changing just enough to signal a pivot in the conversation. She said, quote, "So Carrie, your career has been remarkable, but I think a lot of people are curious about something. You have been very vocal about certain social issues in the past, but lately you have been noticeably quiet on topics that other artists in your industry are speaking out about. Some people are wondering if that silence is intentional." You could see Carrie's expression change, just for a fraction of a second. Her smile remained, but there was a new tension in her eyes. She responded carefully, saying, "I think artists should speak about what feels authentic to them. I have always believed in using my platform responsibly, and sometimes that means choosing when to speak and when to listen." The host nodded, but she was not letting it go. She continued, "Sure, but do you not think there is a responsibility that comes with having the kind of influence you have? When you stay silent on important issues, does that not send a message in itself?" Carrie's posture straightened. She replied, "I think everyone has their own way of contributing to the conversations that matter to them. Not everyone needs to have the same approach. I respect artists who speak out, and I hope people respect that I might choose to contribute differently." But the host pressed on, her voice taking on an edge that had not been there before. She said, "Differently? How? Because from where a lot of people are sitting, it looks like you are avoiding anything controversial to protect your brand. Is that fair to say?" The tension in the studio became palpable. Carrie's jaw tightened slightly, and when she spoke again, her voice was measured but firm. She said, "I do not think it is fair to assume that someone's private actions or beliefs are non-existent, just because they are not performing them publicly. I have my values, I live by them, and I do not feel the need to prove that to anyone through social media, posts, or public statements every time something happens in the world." The host leaned back, a slight smile playing at her lips as if she had been waiting for this response. She said, "Okay, but let me push back on that a little bit. You built your career in part on being relatable, on being someone everyday people could connect with. When everyday people are struggling with real issues, when they are looking for voices they trust to acknowledge what they are going through, and you are silent, does that not break that connection?" Carrie's eyes flashed with something that looked like frustration mixed with disbelief. She responded, "I think you are conflating two different things. Being relatable does not mean I owe anyone a running commentary on every political or social issue. My music speaks to people's experiences, their emotions, their lives. That is where I connect with my fans. Not through hot takes on Twitter or Instagram statements that get dissected and twisted." "But you are a role model," the host interjected quickly, "especially to young women. Do you not think they deserve to know where you stand?" Carrie's voice rose slightly, the first real crack in her composure. She said, "They deserve to know me through my music, through my actions, through the way I treat people. They do not deserve to have me reduced to a checklist of approved opinions. I am a human being with complex thoughts and feelings, not a brand ambassador for anyone's political movement." The host's eyebrows raised. "So you admit there is a political element to your silence?" "That is not what I said," Carrie shot back immediately, "and I think you know that. You are trying to twist my words into something controversial, and I am not going to play that game." The studio fell into an uncomfortable silence for a moment. The host shuffled her notes, then looked back up with a different question. She said, "Let me ask you this then. Your fan base is diverse, people from all walks of life, all political backgrounds. Are you afraid of alienating part of that fan base if you speak up?" Carrie took a deep breath, visibly trying to maintain her composure. She said, "I am not afraid of anything. What I am trying to protect is my ability to be an artist, not a pundit. The moment I start weighing in on every divisive issue, I stop being someone who brings people together through music, and I become just another voice in an already deafening argument. Is that really what you want from me?" The host did not answer the question directly. Instead, she said, But some would argue that neutrality in times of crisis is itself a political stance, that by not speaking up, you are essentially siding with the status quo. Carrie's frustration was becoming more evident. She replied, "Who gets to decide what qualifies as a crisis that demands my public statement? Who gets to judge whether my contribution is sufficient?" This is exactly the problem. People want to put everyone in neat little boxes, label them, categorize them, and if you do not fit perfectly into their box, you are the enemy. I refuse to live that way. So you are saying people who criticize your silence are trying to put you in a box? The host said, her tone almost challenging now. "I am saying," Carrie responded, her voice tight with controlled anger, "that I am tired of being told that the only way to be a good person is to perform my beliefs for public consumption. I am tired of the assumption that if I am not shouting into the void like everyone else, I must not care. And frankly, I am tired of interviews that pretend to be about my music but are really just traps designed to create controversy." The host's expression hardened. She said, "That is quite an accusation to make. We invited you here to have an honest conversation. If you find honesty uncomfortable, maybe that says more about you than it does about the questions." Carrie stared at her for a long moment, and you could see the wheels turning behind her eyes. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet but steel hard. She said, "Honesty would be admitting that you invited me here, hoping I would either say something you could use as a headline or that I would refuse to engage and you could paint me as evasive. Either way, you win. Well, I am not going to give you that satisfaction." The host's face flushed slightly, but she maintained her professional demeanor. She said, "I think you are being unfair. These are questions that many people want answered. I am simply giving voice to what your fans are thinking." Carrie let out a short, humorless laugh. She replied, "My fans, really? Because I talk to my fans every single day. I read their messages, I see their comments, and you know what they actually want to talk about? Their lives, their struggles, their hopes, the music that gets them through hard times. They are not interrogating me about why I did not post about the latest trending topic. That is coming from media outlets looking for clicks and views." The host straightened in her chair, her voice taking on a sharper edge. She said, "So you think the media is the problem here? Not the fact that you have a platform that reaches millions and you choose not to use it for anything beyond selling albums." That statement hung in the air like a bomb. Carrie's eyes widened slightly, and when she spoke, there was genuine anger in her voice for the first time. She said, "Excuse me, not use it for anything beyond selling albums. Do you have any idea what you are talking about? I have raised millions for charity. I have supported countless causes that actually help people, not just make me look good on social media. I have visited hospitals, worked with organizations that make real differences in people's lives, but because I do not tweet about it every 5 minutes, it does not count." The host tried to interject, but Carrie kept going, her words coming faster now. She said, "You want to talk about using a platform? Let me tell you what I think is a waste of a platform. It is journalists who reduce complex human beings to sound bites. It is interview shows that pretend to care about substance but really just want a viral moment. It is this entire culture of performative activism where the only thing that matters is being seen doing the right thing, not actually doing it." The host's voice rose to match Carrie's intensity. She said, "That is a very convenient perspective for someone who benefits from staying neutral. You get to keep all your fans happy. You do not risk any backlash. And meanwhile, you can tell yourself you are taking the high road. But is it really the high road, or is it just the safe road?" Carrie leaned forward, her eyes locked on the host. She said, "You want to know what is not safe? Sitting here and being attacked for not performing my values the way you think I should. You want to know what takes courage? Standing up to someone like you, who thinks they have the right to interrogate me about my personal beliefs and decisions. I came here to talk about my music, my art, the thing I have dedicated my life to. Instead, you have turned this into an inquisition." "An inquisition?" The host scoffed. "I am asking questions. That is literally my job. If you cannot handle being asked questions, maybe you should not be doing promotional interviews." Carrie's voice dropped to a dangerously calm level. She said, "There is a difference between asking questions and setting traps. There is a difference between journalism and ambush. And right now, what you are doing feels a lot more like the latter." The host shook her head, her frustration now evident. She said, "You know what I think? I think you are so used to softball interviews where everyone praises you and asks about your favorite color that you cannot handle being challenged. Real interviews involve tough questions. That is how we get to the truth." "The truth," Carrie repeated, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "The truth is that you do not care about getting to know me or understanding my perspective. You care about creating a moment that will trend on social media. You care about views and engagement, and if you have to bully your guest to get there, so be it." "Bully?" The host's voice was incredulous now. "I am bullying you by asking you to explain yourself." "You are bullying me," Carrie said, her voice steady and clear, "by refusing to accept any answer I give. by continuing to push and prod and insinuate until I either break down or say something you can use against me. Every answer I have given you, you have dismissed or twisted. So yes, I would call that bullying. The tension in the studio was suffocating now. The crew members were exchanging uncomfortable glances. The host took a breath, clearly trying to regain control of the situation. She said, "Look, I think we have gotten off track here. Let me ask you something different. Your new album deals with themes of personal growth and resilience. Can you talk about what inspired those themes?" Carrie stared at her for a long moment, and you could see she was debating whether to accept the olive branch or call out the transparent attempt to smooth things over. Finally, she said, "You know what? I do not think I can do this anymore. I do not think I can sit here and pretend like the last 10 minutes did not happen. You do not get to attack me and then casually pivot back to the talking points like nothing went wrong." The host's face showed genuine surprise now. She said, "I am trying to move the conversation forward. Is not that what you wanted?" "What I wanted," Carrie replied, her voice thick with frustration, "was to be treated with basic respect. What I wanted was to have a conversation, not be put on trial. You asked me to explain myself, and I did. You asked me about my silence, and I told you my perspective. But none of that was good enough for you because it did not fit the narrative you wanted." "There is no narrative," the host insisted, but her voice lacked conviction now. "I am just doing my job." Carrie stood up, and you could hear a collective intake of breath from the crew. She said, "Then maybe your job needs to change. Maybe journalism should not be about gotcha moments and manufactured conflict. Maybe it should be about actually listening to people, understanding their perspectives, even when they are different from yours." The host stood as well, her professional mask slipping to show genuine concern. Now she said, "Carrie, please sit down. We can talk about this. I did not mean to make you feel attacked." But Carrie was already removing her microphone. She said, "That is the problem right there. You did not mean to. You did not even realize what you are doing. You think you are holding me accountable, but what you are really doing is trying to force me into a box that makes sense to you, and I am done being boxed in." The host's voice took on a pleading quality. She said, "We have 3 more segments scheduled. Your team agreed to a full hour. You cannot just leave." Carrie paused, the microphone now in her hand. She looked directly at the host and said, "Watch me. I will pay whatever penalty my team agreed to. I will deal with whatever professional fallout comes from this. But I will not sit here for another second and be treated like I am on trial for the crime of not being performative enough for your audience. You are making a huge mistake," the host said, her voice a mixture of anger and panic now. "Walking out is only going to make things worse. People are going to think you have something to hide." Carrie laughed, but there was no humor in it. She said, "Let them think whatever they want. I have been in this business long enough to know that people will think what they want to think regardless of what I do or say. The only mistake I made was thinking this would be different. That maybe, just maybe, I could have a genuine conversation about my work without being interrogated about every aspect of my personal life and beliefs." "This is not an interrogation," the host protested, but her voice was weak now, the fight draining out of her as she realized what was happening. "Then what would you call it?" Carrie asked, her hand on the microphone back at her waist. "Because from where I am standing, it felt like you had already decided who I was and what my answers meant before I even opened my mouth. You had your story written, and I was just supposed to play my part." "That is not true," the host said, but she could not meet Carrie's eyes. Carrie finished removing her microphone pack and placed it carefully on her chair. She said, "You know what the saddest part about all of this is? I actually respect what you do. I respect journalism. I respect people who ask tough questions and hold powerful people accountable. But that is not what this was. This was you trying to catch me in some kind of contradiction, trying to expose me as a fraud or a hypocrite. And for what? A viral clip that will be forgotten in a week." The host finally found her voice again, and there was genuine emotion in it now. She said, "You think this is easy for me? You think I enjoy conflict? I am trying to ask the questions that need to be asked. I am trying to do meaningful work in an industry that is constantly changing, where everyone wants everything to be surface level and safe. I thought you of all people would understand that." Carrie's expression softened slightly, but her resolve did not waver. She said, "I do understand that. But there is a way to ask hard questions without being adversarial. There is a way to challenge someone without making them feel like they are being attacked. You could have asked me about my perspective on using platforms for advocacy in a way that was curious instead of accusatory. You could have explored the nuance of what it means to be a public figure in this current climate without assuming the worst about my motivations." The host's shoulders sagged slightly. She said, "Maybe I could have approached it differently. But you have to understand the pressure I am under too. Everyone wants me to be tougher on guests, to not let them dodge questions, to get real answers. If I go soft, I get criticized for not doing my job. And if you go too hard," Carrie replied, "you lose the trust of the people you are interviewing. You turn every conversation into a battle. Is that really the kind of journalism you want to be known for?" The host did not answer immediately. When she finally spoke, her voice was quieter. She said, "I did not invite you here to ambush you. I genuinely did think these were important questions." Carrie nodded slowly. She said, "Maybe they are important questions, but the way you asked them, the assumptions behind them, the refusal to accept my answers, that is what made this impossible. I am not saying I am above criticism or tough questions. I am saying that I deserve to be approached as a human being, not a target. So what happens now?" The host asked, and for the first time, she sounded uncertain. Carrie picked up her microphone equipment and held it for a moment, as if weighing her options one final time. She said, "Now I leave. And hopefully, this becomes a lesson for both of us. For me, it is a reminder to be more careful about which interviews I agree to. For you, maybe it is a reminder that there is a difference between holding someone accountable and holding them hostage." The host flinched at that last word. She said, "That is harsh." "Is it?" Carrie asked. "Because I feel like I have been trying to leave this conversation for the last 5 minutes, and you keep trying to pull me back in. Even now, you are trying to make me feel guilty for setting a boundary. That is what I mean by hostage." The silence that followed was deafening. You could see the host struggling with what to say next. Her training telling her to keep the guest talking, her instincts telling her this was already beyond saving. Finally, she said, "For what it is worth, I am sorry you feel that way." Carrie's expression hardened again. She said, "See, that is exactly the problem. I am sorry you feel that way is not an apology. It is a deflection. It puts the responsibility back on me for my feelings instead of acknowledging the actions that caused them. A real apology would be, I am sorry for the way I approached this interview, or I am sorry I made you feel attacked. But you cannot even do that." The host's jaw tightened. She said, "Fine. I am sorry if some of my questions felt aggressive. I was trying to get genuine answers." "If some of your questions felt aggressive," Carrie repeated, shaking her head, "you are still qualifying it. You are still making it about my perception rather than your actions. Do you not see how that is part of the problem?" The host threw her hands up in frustration. She said, "What do you want from me? I am apologizing. I am trying to make this right. I do not want anything from you anymore," Carrie said simply. "I just want to leave. I want to go home, regroup, and figure out how to talk about this in a way that does not play into exactly the kind of drama you were hoping for. You are going to talk about this publicly." The host's eyes widened slightly. "Of course I am," Carrie replied. "Do you think I am just going to pretend this did not happen? People are going to ask. My fans are going to wonder why I left. I am not going to lie to them." The host's voice took on an edge of panic. She said, "You realize this could damage both of our careers, right? If you go out there and paint me as some kind of villain, if you make this into a bigger story than it needs to be." Carrie cut her off. She said, "I am not going to paint you as anything. I am going to tell the truth about what happened here today. If that makes you look bad, maybe you should think about why that is. I am not responsible for protecting your reputation at the expense of my own integrity." "So that is it then," the host said, her voice flat now, resigned. "You are just going to walk out, tell your side of the story, and leave me to deal with the fallout. What did you think was going to happen?" Carrie asked, genuine curiosity in her voice now. "Did you think I was just going to sit here and take it? Did you think I would smile through it and then go home and never mention it again? I am not that person. I have never been that person." The host looked down at her notes, then back up at Carrie. She said, "I thought you were professional enough to finish what we started." Carrie laughed, a real laugh this time, though there was still an edge to it. She said, "Professional? That is funny, because I think walking away from a situation that has become hostile and unproductive is actually the most professional thing I can do. Staying here and continuing to engage in a conversation that is going nowhere, that would be unprofessional. That would be wasting everyone's time." The host opened her mouth to respond, but Carrie held up her hand. She said, "No. I am done. I have said everything I need to say. You can use whatever footage you want from the first part of the interview. You can air this entire conversation if you think it makes you look good, but I am not staying for another second." She turned to walk off the set, and the host called after her, one last desperate attempt to regain control. She said, "Carrie, please, think about what you are doing. Think about how this looks." Carrie stopped and turned back, her expression unreadable. She said, "I have thought about it. I have thought about how it looks to stay in a situation where I am not being respected. I have thought about what message that sends to people who look up to me, and I have decided that walking away with my dignity intact is more important than how it looks to people who are never going to understand anyway." And with that, she walked off the set. The cameras kept rolling, capturing the host standing there alone. Her expression a mixture of shock, anger, and something that might have been regret. She looked directly into the camera, opened her mouth as if to say something, then closed it again. After a long moment, she simply shook her head and said, "We are going to take a break." The screen cut to commercial, but the damage was already done. Within minutes, clips from the interview were circulating online. People took sides immediately, some defending Carrie for standing up for herself, others criticizing her for walking out. The host faced her own wave of criticism for the aggressive line of questioning, but also had defenders who praised her for not backing down. The thing about moments like this is that they rarely have a clear villain or hero. They are messy, complicated situations where two people with different perspectives and pressures collide, in a way that neither of them fully anticipated. Carrie came in expecting a promotional interview and got an interrogation. The host came in trying to do serious journalism and pushed too hard. Both of them made choices that escalated the situation, and both of them paid a price for it. What made this interview so compelling, so uncomfortable to watch, was the rawness of it. These were not scripted responses or carefully managed talking points. This was two people having a real, unfiltered conflict in real time, with all the awkwardness and tension that comes with that. It was the kind of television that you cannot look away from, even when you want to. The question everyone was left with was not who was right or who was wrong. It was bigger than that. It was about what we expect from celebrities, from journalists, from public conversations in general. It was about whether we have created a culture where genuine dialogue is even possible anymore, or if every interaction has to be a performance, a battle, a moment designed to go viral. Carrie Underwood walked off that set, but she walked into a much larger conversation about authenticity, accountability, and the cost of being in the public eye. The host stayed in her chair, but she had to face questions about where the line is between tough journalism and combative interrogation. Neither of them emerged unchanged. So what do you think? Was Carrie right to walk out, or should she have stayed and finished the interview? Was the host just doing her job, or did she cross a line? Drop a comment below and let us know your thoughts. And make sure you hit that subscribe button because we are going to keep covering the stories that everyone is talking about. What other celebrity interviews do you think went too far?